to our parking lot, walk to the high school, watch my daughter in color guard, middle school, game, which was great. It was perfect timing. And then walk here, so.
You got your walking.
Split it right down to bend it
Alma,
over.
Pleased.
Alma, it is working out perfectly right now.
Good. But you didn't come to my birthday.
No, I didn't come to your birthday.
This was this week. I'm free.
What
It's
happened?
got to be
I know. I did a little bit last night.
cold. So my backyard. I broke a limb out of the top.
I mean, the 80s, not yeah, but no, it's.
Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Notice of an open work session of the City Council of the City of North Kansas City, Missouri, October 17th, 2017. Mr. Eric.
Thank you, sir. At City Council meeting on September 19th, we had an item before you, proposed award of contract to Olson Associates for the design, complete design of the Burlington Corridor Complete Street Project. And at that time, at that meeting, the council asked to defer consideration of that pending an opportunity to talk about the project with the Missouri Department of Transportation, of which, of course, Route 9 is a state route, and this would also be affected by, conceivably, by work that might occur on the Buck O'Neill Bridge in the future. So Shelley Daniel, who is the area engineer for the Missouri Department of Transportation, is here tonight, available to try to answer questions that you might have and concerns from a MoDOT perspective. Also here, in case it might prove useful, is Jonathan Hofflander from Olson Associates, the prospective engineering firm. And so at this point, I thought I would ask Sarah Copeland just to reintroduce the project to you, to remind you of what brings us to this point tonight. Sarah.
Thank you. So I'll just give you a brief overview of the project and how we got to this point. So this really goes back to the 2009 Burlington Corridor Study, which focused on urban design and redevelopment issues and resulted in our Burlington Corridor Overlay District, and the North Rail Streetcar Extension Study, which recommended making improvements to Burlington to support pedestrian-oriented development. And so we started in 2015 the Burlington Corridor Complete Street Plan, which you adopted in May of 2016, that called for making improvements to the street right-of-way along this corridor. So the Burlington Corridor is about 2 miles from 10th Avenue to 32nd Avenue, and both the Burlington Corridor study that we did in 2009 and our overlay district and this complete street plan divided up into 3 sections. And for the complete street plan, that's based on how wide the right-of-way is through this area. And just to remind you what the existing conditions look like, this is a picture looking north on Burlington at 14th Avenue. We have 3 lanes of through traffic in each direction. We have, especially in the central area, on-street parking on both sides. We do have discontinuous sidewalks. There are areas in this corridor that do not have sidewalk today, and it is a transit spine entering the Northland from downtown. So the project overview, and this was in your packet for tonight's discussion. In our southern segment between 10th and 12th, we have the most narrow right-of-way. It's about 110 feet. And then our plan is to maintain the 3 lanes of traffic in each direction, but add cycle track, a 2-way cycle track on the east side, and further extend sidewalks where we need those. And then in the central and in the northern segments where we have more right-of-way, we would repurpose some of the existing on-street parking on the east side and also reduce the lanes to a consistent width so that we would have room for that cycle track to continue all the way north to 32nd Street. We also included this in your packet, which just shows an overview of what these segments are from a kind of a aerial view going all the way up to 32nd Avenue. So, for example, this is looking north on Burlington at Armour Road, and this is what it would look like with those improvements. Well, we still have the 3 lanes of traffic in each direction and left turn lanes, but we have the 2-way cycle track on the east side, improved bus stops, and improved crossings for pedestrians at our intersections. We anticipate in the plan phased implementation, moving from east to west, so we would make east side improvements first, then improvements to the medians, and then improvements along the west side of the corridor. And we have budgeted this for 2017 to do engineering and construction documents, and then to start construction in 2020. And that construction is tied to when we expect to receive a reimbursement from federal funds of $3.8 million to support that first phase of construction. This was a service transportation grant that we applied for last year and received through the Mid-America Regional Council. So we're working towards being able to obligate those funds to start construction in 2020. So our next steps are to do the engineering work that's required to develop construction documents. That would include engineering and survey, environmental assessments, coordination with MoDOT, to do preliminary plans for the entire corridor, and then final construction documents for the first phase of construction. And we do anticipate making additional funding applications to help support future phases of construction. Now, the question that was asked when we last discussed this was about coordination with MoDOT, and so Shelley Daniel is here tonight to answer any questions that you might have about our coordination with MoDOT on this. We have been working with them on this project going back to our 2014 grant application to Mark's Planning Sustainable Places program, which helped support the original complete street plan that we did. And so I'll stop here and see what questions you might have for Shelley.
Shelley, I remember one time, and I heard you say that North Kansas City is going to have to make up their mind what they want Burlington to be. What did you mean by that?
Well, I apologize. Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity to come up here and talk. I've been a part of the Burlington studies from when we had the streetcar and a little bit on this one as well. I think I've heard conversations over the year of the differences on how the city would like Burlington to flow relative to traffic compared to being more of a corridor that is all development where traffic doesn't flow as fluent. So I think in this plan, it does not change the way traffic will flow through it, so MoDOT doesn't have as much concerns as we may have in previous planning studies.
One more question. Okay, coming across the, I guess, Mid-America Bridge, there is a dedicated bike path on the east side there. And then on the Shoto Bridge, there's bicycle paths on both sides. What maintenance does the state do on those? Do they clear the snow? What do you do in that?
Well, all our cycle tracks, or not cycle tracks, but pedestrian paths on our river crossings have been in place, I believe, since around, during the American Recovery Act, so probably about 2009. So we have them on Shoto, Heart of America, and now on the US 69 bridges. So typically, we don't do snow removal after each event, but I do know after the blizzard we had a few years ago, we did go out there and do quite a bit of snow removal. It would be handled in the same manner as we would handle our shoulders or other sidewalks. It's just not the highest level of service. It's not the immediate first thing we do, but we would go in maybe after everything's clear and there's still snow on the shoulders or on sidewalks, we'll go make sure we push those. As for sweeping, that's probably the most highest maintenance we have on the pass on the bridges, broken glass. So we have a sweeping schedule. We try to get out there monthly.
Well, now, like when you get in, like down in Burlington here, you know, the green area, apparently that is the bicycle and pedestrian tracks on this here.
Correct.
And then you've got those things sticking up in the air to protect the pedestrian and stuff like that. How does MoDOT handle that? I mean, you can't, you know, dodge that stuff. You know, you ain't stay inside of that. And
I believe the plans that we have here are just concepts. And so as they develop, a lot of those issues on maintenance will have to be worked out between MoDOT and the city. Typically, when we allow these type facilities to be added to our system, there is an agreement that we get in with the city where the city would handle maintenance of any of these add-ons, including sidewalks or cycle tracks are new for us. And we've been in discussion with North Kansas City on the cycle tracks you're adding on 210, so we are open to them. But as for maintenance, we'll have to enter into some type of maintenance agreement or a licensing agreement with the city.
So just to follow up real quick, yeah, as Shelley mentioned, we do see that, and we haven't come to we haven't had those discussions at this point because it's not quite to that point yet. But yes, as to who would maintain that facility, for example, to be determined between mutual agreement between MoDOT and the city, and that would be the city council, but we haven't had those discussions yet.
We also did that with the new sidewalks on Armour Road as part of our Armour Road redevelopment area projects. You all approved a maintenance agreement for those sidewalks. For this concept, we are planning that cycle track would be 10 feet wide, so it would be wide enough for us to get some kind of truck down it to do, snow removal if we needed to. But as Shelley said, that would be a conversation that we would need to have further as we get into the design.
And if you're maintaining the bridge right now, the track over the bridge, that I don't know how wide that is, but that's pretty narrow. You can't get a regular vehicle, I don't think, down that.
No, I don't, we don't use regular trucks on that.
You use like something smaller.
We have special equipment for that.
Because it has a barrier that's unmovable.
Yes, on both sides.
Zach?
First of all, has MoDOT, and maybe they haven't reached a decision yet on the Buck O'Neill Bridge. It's still up in the air, correct? About what they're going to do with the Buck O'Neill Bridge?
I could probably say in most certainty the region has not arrived to a decision on the Buck O'Neill Bridge. MoDOT's desire at this time would be to move forward with a temporary rehab while those discussions continue in the region. We do have funding available to do a rehab on the Buck O'Neill Bridge if necessary, but I think the region in a collaborated efforts trying to determine if that should be something more, which would involve more of a complete replacement of the whole bridge and realignment.
What kind of time frame are we looking at as far as closing the bridge on the temporary rehab then?
The temporary rehab will happen next year. That should be no more than 3 to 6 months closure. We haven't really got into the details on the traffic management plan. The last temporary traffic control plan I saw did have traffic detoured over to Kip Bond Bridge. In the past, we have detoured down Heart of America, and even with the detour signs in place, we do expect folks to diverge and use Burlington as a alternate route.
One other question then, do you see any problem with us starting construction in 2020?
I believe as conversations and decisions are made on Buck O'Neill, we'll have to continue to work with city staff to make sure the projects are well coordinated. Our plan at this time is, I believe, Kansas City may begin an environmental assessment for the Buck O'Neill Bridge, and that entire process takes several years. So I have a feeling your project may be ahead of the Buck O'Neill Bridge, but I can't say that in certainty because that's an unfunded project at this time.
Thank you.
And if the Buck O'Neill Bridge ends up being totally replaced, how many years? That's an estimate.
I would estimate it would take about the same as it did for the Kip Bond Bridge. It'd probably be a couple-year project. If it were totally replaced, the goal is to keep traffic open as long as possible, and that's one reason that's driving that as a regional priority, because they believe they could build a new bridge aside next to the current bridge and only have closures like during when you're doing connection work. Whereas if we move forward with our plan, it would be in 2019. That would coincide with this project in 2020. That would be a 2-season closure, completely closed.
And I think, just from when it's happened before, and I've shared it with staff, it's bumper to bumper on Burlington. I don't know how he could do any work on it during a closure of Buck O'Neill Bridge.
Yeah, I would agree that if Buck O'Neill were closed, we would probably request North Kansas City just to delay their job until the work was completed. And I'm sure the region and Mark would work with them based on that circumstance.
But can I just clarify real quick on that? But that's not necessarily a reason why the council wouldn't move forward with it. That's more of an administrative decision, right? I mean, that could happen if we decided to go forward with it as a council. Administratively, you guys could work together and figure out the best time to close it and reopen and do all that, right?
I would agree, yeah.
Understanding that, okay.
Yeah, we do that quite a bit with our other partners, including KDOT, like when we're doing work and coordination, like we project when we're going to do the project, when we get closer to date, sometimes schedules have to change, but the projects still happen.
So this project, if it were to proceed, if council were to award design, we anticipate would take about 12 to 18 months, the design portion. Our hope would be, and perhaps Shelley can speak to that by 12 to 18 months from now, MoDOT would have a little bit better feel for what's going to be done and when. But we would not recommend proceeding with construction until we knew exactly what was going to happen with the Buck O'Neill Bridge.
Right, okay.
That makes sense.
But you would feel comfortable going ahead and addressing this engineering contract, going ahead and have the plans out there in case there is a closure, then we can still use those plans after the bridge reopens. Sorry, that came out kind of.
Well, if that's the determination of the city to move forward with it, there's no reason why you wouldn't proceed with the plans and be ready
Yeah,
to follow or get ahead of the other project.
okay.
If for some reason we didn't get the construction started in 2020, and this may be a question for Sarah, that money, that federal grants, how would that work? Let's say we started in 2021. Would that money still be there, Sarah? Do you know? Or?
Yes, there is a mechanism where we could ask to push our project back. And that happens, that a project, you know, the engineering work takes longer than you anticipate, or you have other challenges, or you're coordinating around other projects that are going on, like Shelley mentioned. So that happens. I think that, you know, the group that coordinates that, in coordination with MoDOT, looks very negatively on projects that just keep getting delayed, you know, more than once. But, you know, if we were delaying our project to work around a closure on the Buck O'Neill Bridge, I know that MoDOT would work with us to make sure that, you know, what happens is that you swap funds with a project that's, you know, has funds later in time. So they would work with us on doing that.
Tom?
If we proceed to okay this project, and it's all said and done, does the state of Missouri still take ownership of this corridor that we're going to redo? Or are they going to give it back to us? Or are we going to maintain it for the rest of our lives? Or are you going to do what with it?
I don't foresee, I mean, I'm always eager to give roads away, but I don't foresee, I don't know if you're offering, but just joking, but I don't foresee us giving this road to you just because you're doing pedestrian and bicycle improvements. I still think this is a vital link for the Northland to have traffic go north and south, since we have limited river crossings and we have to have redundant systems. I do see us going into some type of agreement to where you have to share in the maintenance of the improvements you've added to the corridor.
On this corridor, are we going to do any road improvements? Sarah?
Well, we would do a mill and overlay.
So in other words, so she could come back to and ask, since we've made those improvements, to share on the cost of that forever.
No, I think when Shelley talks about improvements that we're adding to the corridor, she's specifically talking about the cycle track and additional sidewalk, not the travel lanes.
Correct.
At one time, I thought I heard that we were going to take out the median, you know, that's in there now, and move the drainage to the center of Burlington. Is that still?
Yes, this project still does include reconstruction of the medians.
Okay, no,
So who takes care of that then?
you're redoing a lot of road. If you take that out, you're going to have to redo the road to get the drainage to go to it.
We already maintain the medians.
I know that, but if you take the mediums out and put the drainage down through the middle of it, then you're going to have to regrade both sides to bring the water to the center. I'm sure it doesn't do that now.
The drainage for the existing roadway. Part of it goes to the sidewalk portion, the building portion, but the inside lanes, the lanes that border the median, those actually slope right now towards the median. And there's drainage facilities and structures right along that curb line, right next to the median that are in there today. Everything from that dashed line for the inside lane, everything drains towards the median as it does now. So what we'd probably look at doing is trying to not significantly modify those drainage patterns, because you're right, you'd have to recrown the road, and that's significant roadway improvements that currently aren't in that budget for what's planned for the improvements on there. So that's what we'd look to do, is to utilize those existing drainage patterns and keep it that way without.
In the future, do you see changing anything there, or it remains the way it will be?
With changing the drainage patterns? No, I don't foresee significantly changing that, trying to maintain that as close as we can to how it is today.
Anybody else?
Well, this has been a profitable meeting, I think, but it's left an awful lot of still unanswered questions, things that are up in the air, things we have to wait and see, things we have to wonder about going on. But we have committed ourselves to getting this thing done. I don't see any reason why it can't move forward. As long as we've got safeguards against getting the city committed to something economically and feasible to take care of.
Mr. Mayor.
There is a lot of unanswered questions.
Are you done?
That's it.
Well, first of all, I think there was a concern among a lot of the council members and the governing body members of who would be maintaining the Burlington. And as I can tell, the implication is that the state would continue to maintain Burlington if this project did go forward.
I think I'll help clarify. We'll continue to maintain the travel lanes and what we're maintaining today.
I mean, like snow removal.
Snow removal, paving in the future, striping, things we do. But as for the cycle track and the sidewalks, that would probably be the city. And if you do anything aesthetic, somebody more, there's different features in this plan that you would have to get approval to even add, but say those were approved, you would have to maintain anything aesthetic. If you wanted to add or replant trees or other plantings, you would have to maintain those. I would probably try to negotiate that you guys would have to handle like the litter cleanup, as well on your facility, but mostly just on the cycle track. It hasn't been determined if there's going to be a barrier or a separation between, so all that'll have to be worked out, and those items that might be added, we'll have to negotiate as those come and they're known. Because you're right, there's some things that are unknown, but in concept, MoDOT does support this plan, and we don't see any reason that you wouldn't want to move forward based on MoDOT's involvement in the project.
If I could just clarify one thing, and Shelley, I'm sure you can confirm this. MoDOT cannot give us the maintenance of the travel lanes against our will. If that were to occur, it would be by means of a mutual agreement between the two of us. When that's done by the state, there's some kind of an exchange in which the city gets something in return for taking on the maintenance. So it's not, there's no chance that MoDOT would simply say, it's yours now, see ya. It would have to be by a negotiated agreement.
I would agree with that statement.
We know that there's a real big, a lot of people moving north. And, a lot of those people are going to come, they got to get south to get to downtown. in your opinion, this, whatever we're doing down there on Burlington is not going to impede, we're going to be able to still go 40 mile an hour down Burlington?
I would have to defer that, but we will do whatever necessary, like if I think from talking to our designers, that as long as you're not taking away lanes, that we're not concerned with traffic flow patterns. If there are discussions later that you need to take a travel lane away or add a whole bunch more signals, we'll probably require the consultant or the city to demonstrate that that isn't going to negatively impact Route 9. But at this point, from what we've seen, we don't see that you guys are asking to deteriorate the traffic flow. So we haven't really required anything because we're not to that point. But from what I've seen, I don't think that's what's being asked from the city to MoDOT.
Well,
He had some.
No, go ahead, Fred.
well, one other thing is that we've been awarded $3.8 million from Mark for fiscal year 2020 funds. I wasn't aware of it, and it might just be me, but even with the award of $3.8 million from Mark, I'm starting to understand, and maybe it can be addressed by the city administrator, that the city's still going to have to pay $15.4 million out of their pocket for this project. And that's with the $3.8 million Mark award. And it could even, with cost overruns and what have you, it could be $16 million quite easily.
If the project was fully funded in its concept, that's correct. Now, we would be applying for additional funds through the federal government, through Mark, very successful in this round of getting almost $4 million. But that would be a hope, not necessarily something that you could count on. The other thing, but we would be brought to you in phases. So in approving the design phase at this point and then a construction phase, say in 2020 with the help of the $3.8 million, still the council would not be committing to future phases. Those would come to you one by one. So it wouldn't be that the city would be on the hook for the entire amount. But if the city eventually were to construct, and that would take years and years, but if it were to construct the entire improvement, then that is approximately the estimate of the cost of the entire plan.
But the 3.8 million is going to be used for phase one, and
Correct.
the cost of phase one is what?
About $5.4 million.
Okay, so really you're talking about 5.4 million for phase one, and 3.8 million of that is committed to Mark. So in theory, your next phase would have some ratio where Mark can contribute, not that they have to.
Conceivably.
But certainly it's anticipated.
I wouldn't say anticipated, but we would be applying for funds and hoping that with the support that the
Yeah,
project's
anticipated,
received
probably not
already,
the right
it might
word.
receive more support.
Yes, okay. I just want to make sure that's clear.
So what you're saying though is this would be over X amount of dollars year one and possibly wide amount of dollars year two and et cetera for years 3 and 4.
Or, yeah, it may be not 3 and 4, it might be 8 and 12, but yes, I mean,
Okay.
we're looking at future phases costing it. And the amount that I mentioned, I said 5.4, it's actually 5,712,000, so a little over 5.7 million.
A question for the engineers. Say that we start on this thing and then get down the road a ways and the wheels come off of everything. Is this going to be a big, I mean, if we got part of it done and then we can't do the rest, is that going to be a problem? Or, I mean,
If you can't fund future phases of the improvements, is that going to be a problem with going forward with phase one improvements?
yeah.
Okay. The benefit of doing the east to west implementation of the project throughout the whole corridor from south to north is that you have a complete project all in phase one, if you're looking at it from the pedestrian and bicycle standpoint for what's going on that side of the road. From a pedestrian and bicycle safety standpoint, there's probably nothing worse than having a sidewalk or a bike track to nowhere that just stops arbitrarily at some point, doesn't connect to anything else, and that can be a real challenge. But with the phase one improvements as they've been laid out and as we're intending to look at them to try to implement for construction, that would be a complete network, a complete corridor from the southern end at 10th Avenue all the way up to the northern end, and we envision that coming back around to Mackin Park and Swift and connecting back to city streets back in that way, so it does connect back on the north end as well. So future projects can just build off of that whenever funding does become available and further enhance the corridor and make additional improvements as necessary there.
In other words, you'd put the cycle track in all the way through.
Correct.
On the first phase.
Correct. And then there's also traffic signal improvements. There's potentially some storm sewer improvements that would be needed. The first part of what we're going to look at through the design phase is we're going to look at is designing all of the corridor, all three phases of those improvements to a preliminary design standpoint, so we know how everything works and functions together. And then we can start drawing lines and breaking the total package of improvements into a complete project set. And then when we look at the phase one improvements and moving those forward, and traffic signal improvements is going to be a component of that. So if a traffic signal pole needs to move for the improvements to get in a better location for maybe pedestrian push buttons, or if we're changing the returns, the corners at the street intersections, if we're putting poles in a new place there, that it lines up not only with the phase one improvements, but it also works and lines up with the phase two and phase three improvements when those get put in as well. So, so we can try to limit as much as we possibly can redoing work in future phases that we paid for to do at phase one improvements. And the same is true for, you know, moving curb lines or looking at storm sewer improvements as well, that, you know, we're looking at it for the long-term vision too, but most definitely the immediate project, the phase one improvement project too.
That seems to make sense because you're not throwing any money away.
Right.
All the money that's being spent is basically for an improvement to prepare yourself for the next expense, but you're going to get the improvement. It's like going in for a haircut and a shave, and you're just wind up getting the haircut, and you haven't got the shave yet, but you're not paying for the shave because you haven't used the money.
Correct.
Well, did anybody else understand that they were going to do the cycle track all the way through? I certainly didn't. I thought it was just going to be phase one was so many feet down Burlington. This is the first I've heard about that. Is that?
We've always talked about the cycle track being phase one. That's what's in the plan, is that phase one would be the east side, which includes the cycle track, and phase two would be the medians in the middle of the street, and that phase three would be the west side.
Okay, I guess I'm just not paying attention.
That's the way I remember. It wouldn't make much sense to make a bicycle trail only went a couple blocks,
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
you know?
Okay.
But I do
Be a
have-
short ride.
Yes, sir. Rick.
It's a budget question, and just because I can't remember, when we agreed to, that we needed the water plant rebuilt, there was going to be, because of that, there was going to be a low tide for our gaming fund. Was this already in the works, and that's part of the low tide, or is this going to be
Yes.
on top of
The
it?
$5,712,000 is, phase one is included
Oh,
in
okay.
in the 5-year
Oh, okay.
outlook that I provided you.
I just didn't want it to be a new low tide
No,
on the.
it's not a new expenditure for purposes of projection.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Well, I guess we move to adjourn.
All right, it would be my intention, sir, to go ahead and bring the engineering contract back to you for your formal consideration at a future meeting, probably your next meeting, for your consideration.
Maybe later in November.
Oh, you won't be here.
Yeah, I'd really like to be there for that.
We can hold off on that then.
Okay.
We'll perhaps look at November 21st
Thank
as
you.
a consideration.
I think it cleared up some things for us. We were comfortable, I'm comfortable that you came over and addressed these issues. There was a lot of questions. And I still feel there's a lot of unanswered questions, but that's just part of the job, part of the problem. When you take on something of this magnitude, you're not going to have cookie cutter answers all the way down the line. You're going to we'll be met with some surprises, maybe some unpleasant surprises, but things that we have to go through. So thank you so much for coming.
Really, the only unanswered question is just how to coordinate the bridge and that traffic flow. And that answer I got tonight, I felt like when you said you'd work with city staff and you guys would coordinate. And so then I don't feel uncomfortable spending the money on the project. I know that you guys are going to coordinate it and it's going to be the best for the citizens and people going through and our travelers.
I agree. I think we need to move it forward. We all know that Burlington needs some improvements. And I have confidence in city staff and Sarah to work with MoDOT. And, you know, if we design it, hopefully these designs will be good for, several years in case things get delayed.
I agree with that.
Who has the final say on Buck O'Neill, what to do with it, the state or the city or?
MoDOT would have the final say. But right now, the decision's really coming down to funding,
Oh, yeah.
like
I'm
$100
sure.
million funding gap, so.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.